welcome to the Marina Skua Podcast. My name's Marina. I'm a dyer and spinner of yarns and also a tech editor and fledgling designer of knitting patterns. I'm recording today in Bath, a city in southwest England where I live and work. You can find me on Instagram, Ravelry and Facebook as Marina Skua. I'm Marina Skua everywhere. And the podcast is going to be about mostly knitting and yarn, but also occasionally other crafts and things I like to make. Today I'm going to be talking about a couple of the things I have on my knitting needles at the moment, and I'm going to give an overview of how I create the colours for one of my yarn lines, and I'll also show you how I process fibre to get it ready for spinning, so it'll be start to finish creation of an art bat. So I really hope you're going to enjoy the podcast. It's my first one, and so I hope it's something I get used to, and I'm really excited to share some of the things I'm working on. So I'm going to show you some of the things I'm knitting at the moment. I'm not going to show you all of them because at any given time I usually have about 6 things on the needles. I'm the very opposite of a monogamous knitter. I'll cheat on my knitting projects in front of each other, so they can't get jealous. They all get got to eventually. So one thing I've been working on for a while is this little pair of mittens. I always work on socks and mittens 2 at a time because I think it's just a really good way to do it. I'm a very, very impatient person, and if I finish one mitten I'll just be pissed off that there's another mitten to do still. So I do them 2 at a time. It also makes magic loop slightly less painful, so I just do them on needles in the round. And I do the same for sleeves as well on jumpers when I'm working them round. So this is in my Mend It 4-ply yarn. I'm using 3 colours. So there's the Fox, Stormy, which is the dark orange, and Sunny, which is the bright orange there, and then Stormy Leaf, which is the lovely green there. And so I've got my little balls of yarn here. And so the pattern for these ones is from my friend Alex's book, Colour Knit Mittens, which is a lovely concept. I'm not generally into adult colouring books because I can just draw things and colour them in myself. But with this one, you've got the patterns for the mittens. I think there are 12 patterns in the book. Can't actually remember. But it has the layout in the grid of the colourwork pattern, but without the colours included, and so you can colour them in to suit whatever yarn you're using, which I think is a really lovely idea, and it means that you can work it for 2 colours or 3 colours or however many you want to. The way I've done it for 3 colours means that actually to get between these 2 bright orange stitches here and these ones here, it actually requires really, really long floats, and I hate catching floats, so I sort of wish I'd thought about that beforehand, but I think it's going to look really nice once they're finished. The design for these ones is called Zigzag, and so these are going to be nice big chevrons that carry on up the mittens, and then there'll be more green at the top. So yeah, I love those. I'm actually excited to be knitting with my own yarn because it's not something I often do. And yeah, I need to get more stuff done in Mend It because it's just a really nice yarn to work with. And the second thing I'm going to show you is, this is slightly awkward to show. This is the bottom of it. This is called the Oak Moss Tee. So it's going to be a sort of t-shirt, well, not really a t-shirt, a sort of top with sort of little off-shoulder drop shoulders, well explained. And so it's mostly stockinette. It's done in the round up to the underarms, and then front and back are worked separately. and it's got this lovely little moss stitch border at the edge, which I really enjoy. And that's part of the name because it's worked in, well, English moss stitch, which is what people in the US and I think other places would call seed stitch. Knitting World doesn't like to do things in a straightforward way in different countries. But yeah, so it's got the moss stitch, and also the colour is really similar to a kind of lichen called oak moss. So I really like that. I like naming things after things found in nature, and I'm hoping that when I have the pattern ready to release for this one, that I'll be able to do a shoot in a forest or something, because I think that would be lovely. And so I will actually be looking for test knitters for this one in a couple of weeks. Obviously it's difficult to show you what it's going to look like because it's only half done. But yes, it's going to be really lovely. I think it'll be a good piece for layering, because I'm not keen on wool t-shirts. Because they get really warm, but then your arms get cold, and I'm not good at that. If I want to be warm, I want to be warm all over. So this is a cotton linen blend yarn. I think it's 40% linen, 60% cotton, or vice versa. I've got the label here. It is 60% linen and 40% cotton. So it's in this beautiful pale colour here. So it's a sort of grey-green. In most lights it looks grey, but it is actually slightly green. And it's got this beautiful slubby texture to it. The yarn's from Woolly Knit, and it's called Linen Luxe. And it's a completely European yarn, so the linen is from Belgium, and the cotton is grown in Spain, and the yarn's spun in Spain, and then sold in the UK. So yes, I will be looking for test knitters for this, and I'm hoping anyone who's able to test knit in the original yarn. I'm chatting to Woolly Knit, and hopefully I'll be able to offer a discount to test knitters for the yarn, because I think that's a really nice thing to do. So hopefully that will be going out in the next couple of weeks. So if you are interested in test knitting, I will include a link in the description box below, and then you can sign up to my pool of test knitters, and then whenever I have a test knit opening, you'll hear about it and you can apply, and then you can test knit my designs, so you get early access to them, and you can help me find any problems with them, but they should all be tech edited by then, so there shouldn't be too many problems. But yeah. So here I'm skeins up my Mendip 4-ply Stormy base. This is the darker colour of the two bases, so it's spun from the grey and the brown and occasionally black fleeces, so you get this beautiful heathered colour, which is a natural mix of most of the Shetland shades, except the white, which goes into the white base. I currently skein everything by hand. I've got a big cone of yarn on the floor on a set of scales in front of me, so I can keep track of how much the skein is going to weigh, so I can make sure that each skein is going to be the correct weight. Obviously it's really inefficient to do everything by hand like this. It's quite slow and ends up wearing out my wrists quite a lot. But it's what I've got at the moment. It doesn't cost me anything. I do need to look into getting possibly an electric skeiner with a counter, which will help not quite automate things, but make things a bit faster, so I spend less time just winding things round and round and round. And we're getting to the end of the skein there. A few more rounds. And there we go. So I hope you enjoyed that little overview of how I dye my Mendip yarn. I think it can be interesting for people to see the behind the scenes progress of things, because sometimes you're not aware of the processes involved, and I think it's nice to give people a little glimpse into that. So I've got the lovely skeins here. You can see it's this beautiful heathery texture where some of the darker fibres in there add sort of tweedy effect, which I really love. I've also got a few mini skeins. So for dye baths going forwards, I'm going to be offering mini skeins as well. So I've got a few available in the shop, and each time I do batches going forwards, I'm going to offer them. So the standard skeins are 50 grams, and these ones are 10. And I think it'll just be really good for any kind of colour work, like the mittens I showed you earlier, and things where you might just want some for a contrasting collar or cuff or something. Anything where you might just need a little bit, because sometimes you don't need a full skein for things. You might have seen in the video where I was taking the yarn out of the dye water that there was still a little bit of yellow in the water. I always aim to exhaust my dye pots, so if the yarn doesn't quite take all of the colour, I dye up other things. So I will just put things in the pot until all of the colour is gone. It's not the most precise way of doing things, but I really like to have sort of one-off colours and things like that for my hand spun and my bats. So this is a pure BFL top, so it's British Blue-Faced Leicester wool. It's not actually showing up very well there. It's a bit too bright for it, I think. And I've also dyed up, this is Blue-Faced Leicester blended with soy. Let's see if I can, there you go. So you can see the streaks of soy here add a really nice sort of glossy finish. I often use it instead of silk because I'm slightly strange about using silk. I just find it a weird way of processing fibre. So I prefer to use vegetable fibres if possible. And so you can see those two against each other there. And so these ones I will probably use in fibre bats, which I will then either spin or sell as bats. And in a bit I'm going to show you how I make fibre bats using different materials. So a few different fibres that I've dyed up a while ago. I think that'll be fun for you to see. I'm here at my second desk. I have two desks. One is the one just over there, which is where I have my computer and my second screen, and it's where I do most of my computer work, and it's usually full of mess. I mean, to be honest, everything here is usually full of mess. This desk, it usually has a space on it with a white linen tablecloth, which is where I do my photography. It's where I take most of my Instagram photos and things, just because it's right by the window, and I've got my daylight bulb lamp just up here, which helps me get colour accuracy on my photos. It's also where I have my drum carder, which is this just here, and I'm going to show you a little bit about how I blend fibres to make into bats, which can then be spun or felted, or used in general fibre arts. So here in front of me I have the 3 fibres I'm going to blend that I have dyed at various points. First up, we've got this gorgeous, let's see, this alpaca. So it's naturally a grey alpaca, which I've then over dyed in sort of reds and yellows and oranges. But the grey sort of brings out this almost maroony shade, but then there are all these little like flecks of brighter colour, and it's not the softest alpaca, but it's just got a gorgeous texture to it, which I've used this, I've had this fleece for a couple of years because most of my raw fibre I take direct from whole fleeces. I believe this alpaca was called Billy. I suspect he's still called Billy, I don't know. So yeah, that's the first one. I like these little locks you get that almost look like claws or flames or something. So there's that one. Then next up is this lighter, got a bit of another one in there. This lighter wool. I probably dyed these at the same time because it looks like the same dye batch to me. Can't guarantee that though. So this is Shetland Teeswater wool, which I get from Fernhill Farm, where I also do a little bit of work for them with their wool business. These are sort of the leftovers because with this fleece, it's got some gorgeous locks in it, which you can see some of here. I don't know if you can see that there. It's really nice and squiggly. I don't think it's going to focus on there. But what I do is I tend to pick out the really nice locks, and I go through and I sort them all by hand, and I sell those as they are, because sometimes, you know, the colour graduation you get on each bit of fibre is often amazing. And so these are sort of the leftovers, the bits that didn't quite go into nice neat locks. There are little squiggly bits, but and so I use these for blending into bats, which I'll then either sell as bats or I'll spin into yarn. And then the next one is this gorgeous sort of mango sorbet colour kid mohair, and I think the camera always struggles a bit with mohair, especially in light colours, just because it's so glossy. Like, I don't know if that'll, yeah, see, it looks really washed out there. It's actually a very warm kind of, it's a mango-y colour. It's an orangey yellow. It's kid mohair, so it's very, very fine. It's gorgeously lustrous. And this isn't actually direct from a fleece. I bought this just as a quantity of kid mohair. Often with these the ones that are just a solid colour like this one, so the others had colour variation in them. This one I believe would have been a leftover dye vat. So when I dye yarn or other things, if the dye doesn't exhaust completely, because sometimes I'm a little bit imprecise with quantities, I always just chuck in some extra fibre to use up the dye that didn't exhaust, to make sure that when I'm finished dyeing there's no colour left in the water, so then that can just be poured away. Often I'll neutralise it and use it on the garden. It has to be neutralised because I use citric acid to set the dyes, and you don't want to be pouring acid all over your garden because, well, there are acid-loving plants, but I don't think I have many of them. So yeah, I'm going to be blending these. I'll show you a little bit of how I do it. I'm not sure if the camera angle is going to work, but we'll give it a try. So I've got my carder set up here. I've got my fibres here. I have to keep a margin here so that the fibres don't get caught up in the mechanism here. You can see it happens a little bit there. I try to keep that cleaned out so that it doesn't get all gacky. But yeah, so I'm just going to show you how I start carding up some bats. So usually this is going to make some horrible noise, by the way. I might have to sort of mute it while I'm winding the card around, because it's just the most disgusting noise, and it kind of makes me wish I could listen to music whilst doing it. I might have to headphone up in the future. But yes. So I'm just selecting little bits. I'm not being particularly picky. I'm just grabbing a little bit at a time. and then I just blend them in chunks, and I like to get a good distribution of each fibre, but I don't want them blended too carefully because I really like the contrast of the colours and the way that little bits of each show up, and it's not just like a uniform blend. So now the card is struggling a bit to get round, and there's a lot of fibre coming off here. I get a lot of the mohair coming off on the front wheel, which is meant to remove any sort of waste and shorter fibres. The mohair's a bit fine, so sometimes it doesn't like to catch. This doesn't go to waste. I scrape it all off, and I put it into my little bag of carding waste. Which, when I've got enough, I blend it all together, and sometimes I'll spin that up and sometimes I'll give them to people. So I'm going to remove the bat off the top one here. Now if this were the final bat, I'd roll it up as I take it off the carder, because I find that quite a neat way to do it. But I'm going to blend this one again, just to get like a little bit more uniformity. So what I do is I take it off the carder, I'll blend the rest of that into bats, and then I'll sort of tear them all into pieces and then blend them together again, just to get uniformity across all the bats. So you end up with slightly less, sort of smaller chunks of varying texture in each one. That's that there, that's how that comes off. I think that's looking really beautiful. Sort of reminds me of rocks in the desert or something, where you get a lot of mineral deposits like iron oxide and things. I love that. So yeah, that'll. So here I've got my bats that have come off the carder after the first round of carding. I've got 3 here. So as you can see, there are big chunks of each type of fibre in there. As you can see, that's a big bit of mohair there. And lots of alpaca here. So I'm going to be blending these together. I've weighed them and I've got 118 grams total. So I'm actually going to split them into 4 bats. So what I do now is basically I just tear them into pieces. This bit's always super satisfying, just ripping up the thing you've spent a while doing. And then I will take those pieces and I'll put them into piles that come to about 30 grams each. I'm expecting to lose a bit more weight just as waste. This is how much carding waste came off in the first round, so that'll go in my nice waste box. So I'll lose a bit more, so I'll probably end up with 4 bats of about 25 grams each, so that'll be 100 grams total. So I'm just going to make these into little piles. I'm not going to show you that because it's going to be very boring just trying to put them on the scales to make sure that each little pile comes to about 30 grams. And then I'll blend them all up together. Now I've got my little heap of torn up bats. So these are approximately 30 grams, and I'm just going to blend these together. There we go. You can see that was much quicker than blending the fibres together the first time round, because this time I don't have to pick and choose and it's much easier going. So this time I'm going to roll it off like this. I don't do this too precisely because I figure a lot of the time people are going to want to do their own thing with it anyway, and I'll probably have to unroll it to photograph it. That's coming off really, really nicely. It's looking beautiful. And there we go. So that's all ready for spinning, or some people use them for felting, or I'm not sure what other people use them for. And so I'll do that 3 more times, and then they'll go on the shop once I've photographed them. Well, thank you so much for watching. I hope you found everything interesting and enjoyable. I know there are lots of podcasts out there, so I'm really honoured that you've made it all the way through this one. And do let me know if you have any feedback or comments or questions or anything you'd like me to talk about in future episodes. You can leave a comment here or send me a message on Instagram or Facebook or email me. I just love to hear from people. So until next time, bye.